Let's talk about Python data types. We have different variable types, such as numbers, strings, lists, dictionaries, tuples, sets, booleans, and none. There's actually more, and in Python you can create your own data type as well. So in this lesson, I'm simply going to show you a bunch of data types and what they could look like. And in the next several lessons, we're going to go through each one by one. So let's get started with one that we've already seen. One called a string, and this is simply a sentence like that. And so it has an opening and a closing quotation mark. You could also use apostrophes if you wanted to, but if it starts with an apostrophe, it must end with an apostrophe. If it starts with a quotation, it must end with a quotation mark. And this allows any form of sentence, any form of characters. Anytime you have basically anything that's not just a number or a decimal, you're going to want to use a string. Next, we have integers. And an integer is just a whole number, like the number 99. Then we have floats. And a float is like 99.0 or 1 or 0.2 or pi 3.14. That's going to be a float. And a float simply means it's a whole number plus it has a decimal in there. Then we have these things called lists. Now in other languages, these are called arrays, but in Python, it's called a list. And it looks like this. Item 1, comma, item 2, comma, item 3. We'll talk about these in depth as well. So don't feel like you have to remember all these. I just want to put these in your brain for the next few minutes. And then we're going to go over each one of these one by one. And so a list here opens with a hard bracket, I guess you would call it, and ends with a closing bracket. And then you have these different items, and they're separated by a comma and a space, or just a comma technically, but it looks nicer if you use a comma and a space. And then it doesn't even just have to be full of strings, because we know these are now strings from line 1. Integers. And we could put floats in here. And so this is going to be a string. This is going to be a float accessing the variable called floats, which is going to be a value of 3.14. And integers. Integers? And this is a variable. It's referenced on line 2, and its value is 99. So this is like saying 99. And so that's a list. Then we have these things called tuples. Tuple. And a tuple is a lot like a list, but we can't change it. So once it's set forever. We'll talk about these again in the future. So we could do something like item 1, floats, integers. We could have all sorts of things in here. Then we have sets, and sets are a lot like a list. Again, we'll talk about these in the future in its own particular video as well. But a set is like a list, but in a list, just like when you're going grocery shopping, it's in order. So you've got item 1, floats, integers. When you have a set, it uses curly braces, and it just says item 1, item 2, item 3. But these are not going to maintain their order. So whenever you access a set in the future, even though we wrote item 1, item 2, item 3, it could end up being like item 3, item 1, item 2. It's not going to maintain its original sort of listing. It's not going to maintain its order. That's a better way to put it. It's not going to maintain its order. And so that's a set. Then we have this thing called a dictionary. And a dictionary, if you come from JavaScript, looks like an object. And so we have some sort of key, some sort of value, comma, a second key, and a second value, comma. And that is a dictionary. Then we have Booleans, and Booleans are either true, and I'm using a code comment here, or false. And notice that it's a capital T for true, and it's a capital F for false. And the last one we might possibly use in this course is going to be the none type. So none is equal to N-O-N-E, and this starts with a capital N as well. Notice this one is a variable, but as soon as I capitalize that N, it changes color for me in VS Code. So that's syntax highlighting, and that's telling me that it's trying to access the none data type. And this simply means that there's nothing in it. So in the next number of lessons, let's go through each of these one by one, starting with integers. Number data types are really important for doing math. So for example, let's go ahead and write something like items is equal to 4. And let's just pretend that we are writing some sort of e-commerce system. So the user has bought or has checked out 4 items and now wants to go and buy these 4 items. And let's say there's going to be a price, and each price is going to be $19.97. So we could say print the total is going to be, well, we know how to do basic math now, so we could do items times the price. And if we print this total and then execute this file, we could do Python integers.py. We're going to get 79.88. Now this is really, really important because if these weren't number types, so this one is an integer and this one is a float, if this was, let's say, a string, and we execute this, this is going to not do what you think it's going to do. So let's go ahead and execute this once more, and we're going to see 1997, 1997, 1997, 1997. And all this is doing is saying 1997 times 4. And so it's taking that string and it's doing it 4 times. Now, a fun little thing you could do here, if you wanted to, is you could make a fun little joke, and you could say, word is equal to, print word times, I don't know, like 10. And let's just comment this one out so that we only get one print statement here. And this is going to say, Batman, something like that. And so this is what happens when you multiply a string, which we've somewhat learned about, with a number. So let's get rid of that. And by the way, how'd you like that for a dad joke? Batman in Python. And so what we want to do is we want to make sure that these are simply number types, so that when we're doing mathematics, we're using either a number, a whole number, or a float. And once more, a float is simply a number with a decimal in it. So even if we did 4.0, that's a float as well. If we do just float, or if we do just 4 rather, that is an integer. And both of these are considered number types. So this one is an integer. Let's do this. Integer. And we'll do a code comment here. And this is a float. And this is multiplication. Now, what I would like you to do is recreate my terrible Batman joke. Take a number as any sort of variable. It doesn't matter what the variable name is as long as you use it consistently throughout the rest of your code. And then multiply it by a string so that you get Oh, and actually there's one more thing I wanted to show you here. Python does this really cool thing. So if we did a really large number like this, if you look at this, could you tell me quickly what number that is? Probably not. But what we could do is we could do underscores. And Python doesn't care about underscores in numbers or in integers. It doesn't matter. It simply says, make it readable. And Python is all about making your code readable and maintainable. And so now all of a sudden we can see that this is 1 trillion. If we don't have those, that's pretty hard to read. We have to then count the zeros manually and figure out what the number is. However, if we put those underscores back, we could do print total. That's not going to be right. Let's go ahead, select that, cut, and put that in here. And it gives us this large number without the underscores. And so this just makes it readable. So that's a fun little thing. I almost forgot to mention that. That's really important when you're working with massive, massive numbers. But your homework stays the same. Go ahead and try to recreate this Batman joke that I did. When you're done that, let's go ahead and talk about strings. Strings. Strings are basically just sentences. We use quotations around them like we've seen before, so we could do something like a sentence is equal to, and then we could fill this with like lorem ipsum or really anything we want in here. We could put a number in here, 1, 2, 3 if we wanted to, but this is not going to multiply the way we expect it to multiply or add or anything like that. Basically, your basic arithmetic is somewhat useless when it comes to a string. And so a string should really just be a sentence. A sentence in here. And all we're saying is, this is a string because it opens and closes with a quotation mark. Or, instead of using a quotation mark, we can use simply an apostrophe. So either one of these works. It just has to start and end with the same thing. Now in Python, we can do multi-line strings with 3 at the start and 3 at the end. So a sentence here and on a new line. So there's 2 ways of doing this. Now you're not going to see this too often. It's going to be pretty rare that you see something like this. Chances are you're going to see it on one line using just one set of quotation marks. But let's go ahead and run this. Python strings.py. And oh, that's not going to do anything. let's print the sentence. Now let's try it. And it says a sentence in here, and this is on a new line. It even kept our blank line in there. Now let's go ahead and have some fun with this, and let's go into our shell. Let's type Python 3.9 or just Python 3 or whatever version of Python you want to use. Hit Control L to clear that out, and let's do a sentence. Sentence is equal to a thing in here, and let's see what we can do. We can do sentence dot and then hit tab, and we're going to see we can do all sorts of things with this. And woo, there's a lot of different things in here. So let's go ahead and just use some basic ones in here. We could do sentence dot upper with parentheses, and it changes it all into uppercase, or sentence dot lower, and that's going to change it all into lowercase. And if you ever want to reference what that sentence is, you could just type sentence, and it basically prints it out for you instead of having to use the print statement. Now, as a fun little fact, you can always do type. Put your variable in there, and it's going to tell you what it is. str means it's a string. You'll see int, you'll see float, list, dictionary, all sorts of things in there, a little bit down the road. But for now, we're just working with a string, and we're using dot lower and dot upper. So what I would like you to do as your task for this particular lesson is create a sentence, and then do dot upper or dot lower on it, and print it out, and then execute that. And so what I mean here is you can have a sentence on multiple lines if you wanted to, and then you could do dot upper. And remember, it needs those parentheses. That means it's going to execute some sort of logic, some sort of function. It's not just another variable, it's something that's going to be executed. So it takes parentheses. Now we can do Python strings.py, and it's all in uppercase. Go ahead and give that a shot. And when you're done with that, let's head on over to lists, where we learn about how we can accept multiple variables in a single variable, or multiple values in a single variable, rather. Lists. Lists are how we can store multiple items in a single variable. And so a list looks like this. List is actually a keyword, so we tend not to use list, so we use usually lst. If you come from JavaScript, it's called an array. If you come from PHP, it's called an array. In Python, we call it a list. It's the exact same thing, just a different name, I guess. I'm not sure why, but we just call it a list. And so it looks like this. Instead of using quotations like a string or just a straight number, we use an opening bracket and a closing bracket. And then we have anything we want. So we could have a string in here, we could have a number in here, and we could have a float in here. We could even, if we wanted to, have another list in here, and you're going to see lists inside of lists when you get into data science using Python, or most programming languages really. And that's how we create vectors or matrices. We're not going to get into vectors or matrices. That's advanced math, and we don't really need that for web development. But let's create an empty list in here with a new item, and we close that off, and let's do one more. My name, Caleb. And so this is somewhat of an advanced list. And in this list, we have our first value, then second value, third value. Our fourth value is actually a list itself, and its first item, and this is where it gets a little complicated, is a new item. And then in our original list, because this one is closed off right here, in our original list, our fifth item is Caleb. Now, at this point in time, if we just print this out, print lst, we're going to see that this isn't actually super useful. And really, it just prints out exactly what we wrote. So what good is that? Now, a little bit down the road, we're going to be learning about loops. And we can actually loop through all of these. And we can say something like for item in lst, print that item. And what this is going to do, and again, we'll talk about this down the road more in depth, is we're going to say for every item in here, so we've got 3, 4, 5, it's going to print that item. And notice that indentation. So we said for every item in our list, colon, tab, print each of those items. And so now we're getting into a lot of referencing. This item references this, which references each one of these at an individual point in time. So if we type python lists.py, it's now going to actually print it out for us. And we could do something a little more unique. Say the item is, and now it's, oh, I got to save that. Let's go ahead and rerun this. And it says the item is string, the item is 1, the item is 3.14. The item is an array or a list with a new item in it, and then the item is Caleb. And so really what you need to know for this is not this part. I'm going to comment this out, but you can access that code later. But for this particular lesson, all you need to know is that this is a list and it stores multiple values in it. And those values could be variables as well. They don't have to be hard-coded like what I did here. They could also be variables. Now let's go ahead and open up our shell, Python 3.9. And what we can do here is create a new list. So let's give it names is equal to a list called Caleb and Nathan. And we have a list. We could also do names dot append. We could add someone to this. We could say add John to it. Names dot append. And then we use an opening parentheses and a closing parentheses. And inside of it, we put some sort of data type. Here, I just put a string called John, and that's going to append it. We could do names, and when we type out names here, we see Caleb, Nathan, and John, and so we've added to it. We could also remove a name. We could do names dot remove, and we just give it the item we want to remove. So let's remove Nathan. We type names again, and this names variable, this list, is now just Caleb and John. Now, a really cool thing we can do here, and you're going to see this quite a bit, especially in data science, is we could pop out that last value. So we could say that last value is going to be John, names.pop. And it doesn't take any sort of parameter here. We just say .pop. Now, it looks like it does nothing, but if we type names, it's just a simple list with one item in it. But what it did here was it took that last item called John. And so what it did there was it took that last value out, like up here, it would take Caleb out, and it threw it into a variable called John. Now, what I'd like you to do is go ahead and give this a shot. Create a list of names, give it 3 or 4 names, and then I want you to do list.append and add a name to it, list.remove, remove a name from this list, and then list.pop, and put that into a variable. And just as a reference, there's a lot we can do with lists. We can hit names, dot, hit tab a couple of times here, and we have append, clear, copy, index, extend, count, insert, pop, remove, sort, and reverse. These are all the different things we can do with a list. So if you wanted to, go ahead and try to reverse the list, see what happens. Go ahead and run sort on that list and see what happens. And feel free to experiment with it. You're not going to break anything at this point. So go ahead and give that a shot. And when you're done that, let's head on over to the next lesson where we learn about a very, very popular data type. It's actually a data structure. Lists are data structures as well, but a very popular data structure called a dictionary.